really excited about this session. I think it's such an important conversation to have. They say fame is the sum of your misunderstandings about a person, because we don't always see the other side of the story. We see what's on the resume, the CV, the polished profile, but there are always wrong turns, detours, things that don't quite fit in the story. And I think that's a really great conversation to have out in the open. And we're really, really lucky to have two people who will be taking us through this. So please welcome to the stage entrepreneur David Belt and Professor of Astrophysics Janna Levin.
Hi. Good morning. You think it's early for you? It's like 3 a.m. for me, right? I was going to start this conversation by giving you a kind of greatest hits of David Belt's accomplishments. It's not even really that, just some glamour points. So David Belt was named one of the 50 most powerful people in tech in New York City, one of 100 most influential people in Brooklyn, and one of the most influential 400 people shaping creative America in 2023 and 2024. And he's definitely one of the top 5 people shaping my life several years running. He has work in the Venice Biennale and MoMA Design and Violence exhibition, which is really just a smashing review. He's the co-founder and CEO of New Lab and vice chair of the Pioneer Works board. And there's so much more, including building refugee camps in Uganda, building cultural institutions around New York. I mean, it's a very long list of accomplishments. And the title of this session was kind of what's behind the resume. So I was going to let David bask in the accolades and then tell us the other story.
Sure, and then I'm going to do the same bit of torture to Janna and read her esteemed academic career. But yeah, so it's all the things that she said are true, but the truth is that, I was a juvenile delinquent. I was kicked out of my middle school. I didn't go to college. I was basically a drug-addled disaster for most of my early 20s. And I was a construction laborer, and then I wanted to be a carpenter, but I wasn't a very carpenter, so I became a project manager. Then I wasn't a very good project manager, so I became an estimator. And like one thing led to another, and all of my kind of best things happened as a result of being restless and not being very satisfied between one thing or another. I started 4 companies. The 4th one is called New Lab, which still exists. All of them still exist. But I think that like what defined my career mostly was a level of like deep dissatisfaction with whatever I was doing, and always having some kind of wanderlust to do something else. And so that's the gist of it, and we'll talk about some of the chapters of that. I'm kind of the most proud, actually, of being part of Pioneer Works, which Janna serves as the director of science and the founding one of the founders of Pioneer Works. And one of the things I'll just lead with is to say I started New Lab, which is a pretty big organization. It represents hundreds of companies. I have employees. We have locations in different parts of the world. But what I hoped to accomplish in terms of community and space in New Lab, I really found at Pioneer Works, and I joined Pioneer Works because of Janna, which we'll talk about. So I think I'll pause there and I'll talk about Janna.
Okay, and then we'll talk about what New Lab and Pioneer Works actually are.
Okay, great.
For people in here.
So, Dr. Janna Levin earned her PhD at MIT in theoretical physics at age 25. She then went on to do postdoctoral work at Cambridge, Berkeley, and Oxford. She's a Guggenheim Fellow. She's a Penn Award winning novelist. She's a chaired professor at Barnard College of Columbia University. She's the first female presenter on Nova, a film about black holes. She has written 3 works of nonfiction, 1 work of fiction, and she's the founding director of sciences at Pioneer Works. And she has published 80 scientific papers over the course of her career. So between us, we have like 1.5 degrees, because I have none and she has 3. That's basically what I like to say. You know, I think that what I will say before I turn it over to Janna is like, what has always drawn me to Janna and her work is a spirit of generosity. So Pioneer Works is in a warehouse in Brooklyn where she constantly brings Nobel laureates to this big, until recently unair-conditioned space, and we jam it full of hundreds, sometimes 1,000 people to hear talks about black holes, animal consciousness, all of these things. And every one of her talks, I understand about 40%, sometimes 50. But I always leave feeling smarter and better than when I started. And I asked her once, like, how does that happen? How can you take such complicated information and make it interesting to somebody with no scientific or academic credentials at all and make it feel inclusive? And the answer she gave me was that she said, for one of her talks to be successful, it has to be understandable enough for a layperson, interesting enough for an expert, and mind-blowing enough that nobody knows where it's going to go. And to me, that really represents generosity, and that's what makes Janna just such an incredible, wonderful person and one of the most important people in my life. So now she'll tell you the real story.
That's all incredibly kind, and I think that experience of having your bio read as an introduction to any talk you give, speaking engagement, panel, I have often that feeling that that's not the real story, right? Because the real story was, I also didn't finish high school. I was in a car accident when I was 16, on my 17th birthday, something like that. And when they fished us out of a canal, after this car accident, everyone just sort of grabbed me by the shoulders, including my parents, and were like, it's time for you to move on. Like, it's enough of this. And I ended up going to college early, hence finishing my PhD so early. So it always sounds like, oh, this accelerated golden paved path, but really it wasn't. It was a lot of pivoting in the face of emergencies. Even in theoretical physics, I was going to study art and philosophy in college. And about halfway through college, I discovered this world of mathematics and physics. And so I was scrambling to catch up. I felt so incredibly insecure. And then going to MIT, where everybody had been studying physics since they came out of the womb, you know? They were all naturals. It had always been their life plan. They were all valedictorians of their graduating class. And so it was, my whole life was constantly scrambling and overcompensating for what the truth was, which is, you know, I fell behind. And I think I became such a mathematical physicist because I was overcompensating for not having years of just intuitive sense of things. And in the end, it was very advantageous. I was more mathematical than a lot of people. And it turned, you know, turning this I guess, disadvantage to an advantage. And even the named chairs and the professorships, there were years where I felt just a vagabond in academia because I couldn't settle down. I love my discipline, but academia was extremely rarefied and extremely insular, and I felt not at home culturally. And so that feeling really haunted me for so long, this kind of sense of isolation and this strange career I had chosen, and this work that I loved, but was lonely, very solitary. And so then comes this moving into the cultural space and engaging with arts and artists, where I felt a more natural kinship in many ways. And so a lot of the accolades were won through suffering, through plight and clawing and risking, taking huge risks. Even books, everyone told me it's a career ruin, devastation to write a book. You can't do things like this. You can't step outside of academia. And I was constantly penalized for doing those things. But in the end, I think that my path was the only path for me.
So maybe we could talk about how we met and just the brief story from your perspective.
I should start
Well,
it.
I'll start. So I wanted to redo this old shipbuilding facility in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, which is this vast warehouse. And I wanted to make it kind of a new type of creative collective workspace for people working kind of at the edge of hard technology. So in my mind, I wanted to create this like X-Men type thing where all these freaks were working on super important and interesting things that was going to be in contrast to Silicon Valley. And there was going to be, you know, instead of this kind of idea of techno-optimism, to be a place where you ask hard questions of technology and hard questions of, you know, all of the issues of the day. And so at the time when I was still optimistic about what that could be, Janna had a collective of MIT freaks working out of a shitty place on Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn. I had many overlapping friends with Janna, of these like MIT makers and builders. And I wanted them to be part of New Lab and to help represent this kind of underrepresented version of what technology could be in New York City. So I went to Janna's workplace, which was called...
We called it DAM, Dark Matter Manufacturing, yeah.
I went to Dark Matter Manufacturing and I pitched her friends and said, hey, come with me, because I'm going to build this amazing thing and you guys can be part of it and we'll do this terrific thing together and I'll have tools and resources and all this shit. And Janna said...
I'm not going. Yeah.
Janna said, I'm not going. This is ridiculous.
Hell no.
She said, hell no. Don't take all my friends.
Yeah, don't ruin my life. Don't take all my friends. So, well, I was just going to say, it was a shitty place where we were, but it was our shitty place. And it was also spectacular. It was this old building in Brooklyn that was owned by a true eccentric, a hoarder. He hoarded all kinds of furniture. Anything you needed, you could find in that building somewhere. You needed a refrigerator, you could find it somewhere in this building. I kid you not. If you needed a tuxedo, you could find it in this building, in your size, whatever it was. You just had to figure out what floor he might have stashed it on. And so we were on the top floor of this building, and the building itself would have been remarkable, but part of his psychosis as a hoarder was that we were not allowed to improve anything. So if the skylights fell in, that was what we were supposed to work with, the you know, open air to New York City winter. So it was a mad place, but it was also fabulous. We had this top floor, and people were welding, sparks were flying, they were building instruments based on theories of math and physics. It was a very MIT but creative maker space, kind of an offshoot, and I loved it. And I loved my people there, and we had no formal organization whatsoever. So our first meeting was in the dilapidated kitchen of the 7th floor, and I was intensely resentful of David Belt. He basically came in and took all my friends. I went to Caltech in California, which is a famous math and science institute, the MIT on the West Coast, Caltech. And by the time I came back, everybody was gone. And so I I cursed him, and I cursed his new lab, which is the crown jewel of a place called the Navy Yard in Brooklyn. It's this remarkable maker space in Brooklyn. And then, I don't know, we fell in love and became friends.
Yeah. So,
My nemesis.
so even when she was hating me, we were able to tell each other jokes, which was a very big part of our relationship. Anyway, so so I did that, and these folks came with me, and I don't know what happened to Janna, but
Yes, I was sad and alone.
eventually, I opened the large version of New Lab, and again, I really thought that I was going to create this kind of other type of community in place. But what happened was, in spite of the fact that I was building a place to combat techno optimism, and just so you know what I mean, at the time in 2016, there weren't a lot of people building hardware in New York. And there was all this idea of the sharing economy, which I just thought was such bullshit. Like, like Uber's the sharing economy. It's nonsense. It's like gamified, like indentured servitude. Like and then like Airbnb is the sharing economy. It's like you're taking your house and making it a real estate asset and ruining neighborhoods all over the world with Airbnb. So the idea that like these are the conversations that were being like kind of whitewashed by tech, I want to do a different place. The problem was, it turns out I was the only one who wanted to have those conversations. And everyone else just wanted to build their thing. And the suspension of disbelief you need to create one of those companies is so high. They were just working around the clock doing that. And so around the time that the big New Lab opened in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, I started going over to a place called Pioneer Works.
Yes, so this is exactly one of those pivots where having the ground collapse underneath me led to a very important move. I felt my whole life I was living with artists, but working with scientists. Even when I was at Cambridge, I was living in London in a warehouse full of artists. When I was at Berkeley, I was living in San Francisco around a bunch of musicians. I mean, it was basically my whole life was marching kind of inevitably towards this collision with Pioneer Works, which I sought out, having been abandoned by all of my friends in my previous makerspace. And Pioneer Works was a cultural center that was started by this artist, Dustin Yellen, and it was a partially finished warehouse, a former ironworks factory, beautiful shell of a building, but very raw and very rough. And it had just been recovering. This is almost 14 years ago. It's shocking to say. It was recovering from a hurricane in a region of Brooklyn that is right on the waterfront and had flooded very badly during Hurricane Sandy. And I just somehow collided with Dustin and Gabriel Florence, who is the founding artistic director, and I began really just hanging out there. I had a couch on a hot floor, as you said, that had no air conditioning. We barely had electrical. We had some long cable running from the first floor for the occasional fan, and I finished writing a book there and slowly began building the sciences. My premise was that science is culture and that it doesn't have to be hidden in other dimensions of culture to be a pillar of an experiment like Pioneer Works. And so I began building science studios there, slowly, organically, unofficially. I probably shouldn't say this through the microphone, but I've never had a contract with Pioneer Works. Raising money, finding philanthropic foundations that were devoted to science to start to see the potential for expanding into this kind of a cultural space. And we very quickly, we used to say, we're just building the world we want to live in, and we're hoping others will be interested too. And there's no way we could have done this as a formal proposal or first incorporated as a nonprofit, and then we did it all in reverse order to the way things are ordinarily done. And people would say, "What's your mandate?" And I would laugh and laugh, say, "Whatever I feel like doing this morning, and that's my mandate." And we would start to hold these events. We had no press, no advertising. I held an event. I invited one of my former MIT professors, Frank Wilczek, who had won the Nobel Prize in, I think, 2006. He is one of the greatest geniuses walking the surface of this earth. So here Frank is coming by train from Boston. I'm unfolding chairs, and we have no idea if anyone's coming at all. I'm so anxious, and to our shock, over 400 people showed up. Over 400 people. Our mics weren't working properly. We really had no idea what we were doing. But the response was so overwhelming that we thought, I guess other people want to live here too, with this vista and this kind of imagining of a different relationship between science, art, and culture. And now we have to close RSVP lists at 1,500 people. I mean, we cannot handle the capacity. It's been so overwhelming. So David did me a favor, is the long story.
Exactly. So by stealing her friends and taking them to New Lab, it forced Janna to create another place. And by her creating another place, it created a rich cultural life for me. So it all really worked out. And I'll tell you, I've been involved with lots of art spaces. I built theaters, I built all kinds of stuff. But there was no place having the types of conversations that Janna was having at Pioneer Works. So the night, Dustin, who maybe some of you know, he is wonderful and completely fucking insufferable. He will just ask you for $1 million the first day he meets you. He just will not stop hounding you. I took him to Detroit one day. He left with 2 commitments to get honorary degrees from prestigious universities in Detroit. He just never stops hustling. And he was asking me to be on the board and asked me to get involved and I'm like, no, I'm not getting involved. And then one night, I was watching Janna give a talk, and the talk was with George Church and Siddhartha Mukherjee. Siddhartha Mukherjee is a famous physician and author. He wrote The Emperor of All Maladies.
Yeah, he won the Pulitzer Prize.
He won the Pulitzer Prize. He wrote a book on genes. George Church is a very controversial figure on CRISPR-Cas9 and gene editing. There was a dinner afterwards. They got in a fight over what it meant to be human. And I was flabbergasted and just in love with the kind of conversation that was happening there. And right at the moment where I was the most enamored with the situation, Dustin said, "We have a board meeting on June 9th. Are you going to come?" And I said, okay. And that was 10 years ago. And I've been very involved. I helped them buy the building. I've been Janna and I are going to build an observatory on the roof of Pioneer Works. Those are some of the images coming by. So really, my business is New Lab, and we're doing interesting work, and it's cool and everything in some ways. But my heart is really at Pioneer Works, and that's where I spend most of my time. That's where most of my friends are. That's where my family comes to be inspired. And again, it's really a unique place. It's not trying to make artists into scientists or scientists into artists. It's really having the right level of reverence and irreverence between those two disciplines in a very lovely way that I think is pretty reminiscent of what's happening here at ZEG, or at least the aspiration of both places shares that.
Yeah, absolutely. David and I are in a collaboration where we're building something, and part of what we're building is physical. We are trying to hoist a spectacular vintage telescope, which we had restored, on the top of the building to build New York City's first public observatory, in a very symbolic beacon that connects the sense of the past, the same era in which the building was constructed, 1800s, to contemporary art present, and this kind of vision of looking to the future. But it's also building, and it sounds corny, but a community. It's also building a culture, and I think, and a paradigm.
Why don't you tell the story about the eclipse?
Oh yeah, so we often bumble into things just because we believe it, and we continually underestimate other people's enthusiasm for the same things. So there was an eclipse in 2017. It was called the Great American Eclipse. It was a total eclipse of the sun, as opposed to a lunar eclipse. It was a solar eclipse. And it cut across a swatch of the US, and it was partial in New York City. I would say about 90% of the sun was occulted at maximum in New York City. But that's a lot. It's still an incredibly special event, but I thought it's a total eclipse here. Most people who are really into this are going to go upstate. You could drive someplace to see the total eclipse. So I ordered something like 150 solar glasses. I put out a notice that we would open our garden. It was middle of the afternoon, at 1 p.m., I think was the eclipse. And it's the only event I didn't ask for RSVPs to keep track of who was coming. I thought a few people in the middle of a workday, you can see the eclipse from any corner out your window. I thought maybe some people will show up to our garden. I get a phone call. I think I was on the news that day because I do a lot of news around this sort of stuff. I was on with one of the Kelly brothers, the astronauts. And I get a call from Gabriel Florence, the founding artistic director. He's like, what is going on? It's 9 in the morning, and there is a line outside Pioneer Works. It wrapped, if you can imagine, this entire city block twice. We had thousands of people show up to a garden that can accommodate a few hundred people. So we took a step back from that, and we thought, wow, people are very excited about this connection with the universe. They came to us because they wanted guidance for how to interpret the experience. And so we somehow figured out, we made it a huge party, spontaneous party. People figured out how to share glasses. We had people spilling out onto the street. We took telescopes with solar filters out onto the street. So the next eclipse, which was 2024, April, also partial in New York, total in other places. We opened up Greenwood Cemetery, which is a spectacular cemetery in Brooklyn, after which Central Park is fashioned. So this is an enormous, gorgeous old cemetery, and we had 10,000 people show up to that event. And so the telescope and the observatory, we thought at first was going to be a small project, and then we realized, oh, no, this is a very substantial project.
So, I mean, the idea that people want to get together and learn as a community, and that science can become part of culture, and that these two things aren't separate, is a really, I think it's beautiful, you know. And to be part of something in New York City, which is this other kind of cultural center, and being part of like this not-for-profit board, it's very aggravating, but it's also, you know, very satisfying. And so I learned a lot. I learned the difference between what you can do with a for-profit versus a non-profit. I learned about like the incentivization of those two things. There's a bunch of projects flashing behind you. Most of them are very different.
There's the observatory model.
There's the observatory.
That's just a rendering of what it will look like.
Yeah.
This also.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of images of Pioneer Works and New Lab, and I built some swimming pools out of dumpsters, which I talked about yesterday. And so I think the point is that we've really both have very different resumes, but I think what we both have is propulsion through dissatisfaction and a desire to connect with communities in different ways than are normally, you know, handled at parties in New York City. Yeah. Maybe we should open it up soon.
Yeah, I think we should totally open it up soon.
I mean, I know it's early, and I don't know if anyone has any comments or questions, but if they do.
Yeah, we thought we'd open it up to questions. I know people were celebrating last night, but I think there's a microphone that will go around if you have a question.
There's one over there to the right.
Thank you very much. I have a question. How do I sustain this operation? Meaning, because it's an education for people, right? It's inspirational, but then to fundraise, is there any commercial activities that could support such a...
I couldn't really hear the question.
How do we maintain it as an institution financially?
How do you support yourself, basically?
So they're very different. So New Lab is a for-profit and a very successful for-profit. So you can talk about that. I'll just say for Pioneer Works, we are a nonprofit. Is our budget's public, right? I can say our budget?
Yeah.
We're like an $8 million a year operation. It's substantial, going towards $9 million. And it's a substantial operation. We have philanthropic support. All of our events are free and open to the public. So it's an incredibly flawed financial model, except for our concerts, which are ticketed. occasional book talks because we sell a book or some such like that. But my science events, which I'll tell you, cost me about $25,000 per event, and that's not including staffing costs, right? It's not including my time, my team's time, the security. Those are free and open to everybody, and that is supported by an organization called the Simons Foundation. So we have Simons Foundation, Sloan Foundation, Wellcome Trust, on occasion Templeton will give us support. And those are the largest and best foundations I can think of in the sciences to work with. So I've been very fortunate, but I had been a theoretical physicist with very close relationships with these funders as a scientist. So I had a way in very quickly to tell them, look, I'm doing this project, literally outside of any prospectus that they were asking for. I could just go to them and say, I want to do this project. So I think that was a very unique position to be in. And then a lot of the arts is supported state, city funding, Thompson Foundation, many wonderful, Dalio Foundation, many wonderful foundations keep us afloat.
Yeah. So it's really a grind every year. So Pioneer Works, like every year we have to raise like $8 or $10 million. It's like a nightmare. Every single year you start at zero.
I just raised $2 million this year, so I'm like,
it's really hard. And so you do the normal shit. You do a gala, you fundraise, you do all this stuff, but it's so hard, and it's so important, and it's so hard. So the other board members, I'm on the board. The other board members are from like super wealthy families from around the world, and they support it, but it's hard. So we just did a $30 million capital campaign for Pioneer Works, because we had to buy the building, we had to bring it up to code, and we had to pay off some things. So we just did that while we were raising the $8 or $9 million a year. New Lab is a for-profit. We do between $30 and $40 million a year in revenue. We're in New York, we're in Detroit, we're in Saudi Arabia, we're in New Orleans, and we work in other places. It was a very hard project to raise money for, because I didn't want to be beholden to a corporation or to a university. So I raised the money independently, which sucked. But now it's an operating business, and we get most of our money from the intersection of public-private partnerships from cities and states and countries and corporations who want to solve problems around, removing carbon from the atmosphere or last-mile electrification. And so we work with the founders of these amazing companies to solve problems that will have hopefully more societal impact. And then there's other people just building robots and shit, but in general, that's how we make money. Any other questions?
it's a question there over here. Yeah. And then I also have a question for you about the church you own.
Okay.
Hi. I was wondering, along the way, in between gathering accolades and moments of perceived self-failures, etc.
Sorry, it's really hard for us to hear you, even with the microphone. Could you say that again?
Okay. I was wondering, along the way, on each of your respective journeys, in between gathering accolades and maybe other moments of self-perceived failures, etc., have either of you grappled with or come up against the notion of imposter syndrome, and how have you grappled with that?
Yeah, I think that so the question was about imposter syndrome, and I can tell you that that was a deeply motivating factor for me. And I think the fact that I didn't have any kind of degrees or any type of pedigree at all really made me want to do it more, because I wanted to show people what I could do, and I wanted to participate in New York City. I came from a very bland, depressed household, and I was born in Trenton, New Jersey, which nobody would be that proud of, although I'm kind of proud of it, but it's not like a place that's you're psyched to be from. And so the idea that I didn't come from a wealthy family, or I didn't come from any type of financial or academic background, it really made me feel like if I didn't get this done, I was like a total piece of shit. And that was not a great motivator. It was more out of like anger to show you what I could do. So I sometimes like put myself in very impossible situations just to prove a point. I'm older now. I don't do that as much. I still do it sometimes, but imposter syndrome has sort of haunted me my my entire career, and I'm kind of grateful for it because in retrospect it's been a terrific motivator to actually break out of being an imposter and make something physical in the world or something that people could interact with, because there's no deniability about that. There's no plausible deniability if you're walking through my fucking building. You know what I'm saying?
I've always found that so inspiring, David, because you just do it. You get stuff done. I very rarely know what you're up to until it's very far along. And it's so impressive. I mean, as a friendship, this has been an incredibly inspiring friendship for me. My work is it's just on pen and paper. I don't observe through telescopes myself for my research. I don't collect data and study data. I literally write symbols on pads of paper, and it's very ethereal. And walking into your building is incredibly impressive, and it's also very exciting. It makes you feel that you can be a part of something and do something. So I love that aspect. For me, absolutely, there is no question. I have had years of feeling petrified, and I've also, it's both my privilege, but I've worked with the greatest theoretical physicists, not only alive, but maybe ever. I was in Stephen Hawking's group in Cambridge. That is very intimidating. My friends have Nobel Prizes. It's very intimidating. And what you cannot do is think, am I good enough for this? Am I smart enough for this? Am I as good as these people? That is not what you can do. You cannot, I mentally would not have survived if that was my thought process. My thought process instead was, how do I love this, what I'm doing? Do I have an idea worth pursuing? And will I, to the death, do what I have to do to execute on this idea? And following that, it was, to David's point, look, there's that paper. It's not about, am I the smartest? Do I deserve it? It's, there's the paper. It's there. If you like that paper, that's the work. And it was a much better attitude for me to have. I'm simply going to make things and do things, and hope for the best. And I just finished a couple of papers which I've been telling David about. They're pretty out there, working on a universe with extra spatial dimensions. But I call them my guys, my guys who are my collaborators. These are three of the great minds, really, today, and it's been my privilege to be able to work with them. And the reason we work together is because we're each bringing something different, not because we're all the same. And somebody's best and then somebody's second best. It's not even like we're so different that we are each bringing. It's more like spokes. We're connecting, and then we make something that none of us would have made it without the others.
I think that's a really good point. Like, I think 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I wanted to show like what I could do. Like, I wanted to show, like, I wanted it to be like my thing. Like, I wanted to like show you, like, they would put me in a zoo if they could see what I could do. You know what I mean? Like, I was just like, I'll show you. And now it's different. Like, now it's sort of like what Janna's saying. Like, I want to be in service of something that I admire. So there was a theater I built in Dumbo under the Brooklyn Bridge in Brooklyn Bridge Park, because I admired this woman who built this theater. And my wife's a costume designer, and I wanted to like use my ability, my strength, my like resources to be able to help build a theater that needed to exist. And that's why I'm at Pioneer Works, because I want to serve Janna, because I admire Janna. I love Janna. I feel inspired by Janna. She's a flawed protagonist. You know, she's like this scientist who also has to do all of this other stuff to make her feel alive. And so to be able to have some skills and to be able to use those skills in the service of something else is sort of it's one of like life's greatest privileges. And I just also want to say, I've built stuff all over the world. I've built stuff in Europe. I built stuff in Rome, in Paris, in Berlin. I've worked in Uganda. I've worked all over the world. To be part of New York City, I love New York City like I love a lover. It's so incredible to me that I get to be part of New York City, that I get to live there, that I get to raise my kids there, that I get to like be part of like the Pioneer Works or the New Lab community. It's a life beyond my wildest dreams. And so the idea that I get to also be of service to a place that I love is just one of the biggest honors ever. And so I think I should shut up.
And I think the ambition of the observatory is doing something for this character, New York City, that we love, this entity, this force, because it will change part of the skyline. It will change the waterfront, and the idea of leaving something for New York City is very moving. I think very motivating. I know we started late, so I think our clock isn't quite right. Yes, you have a question here, and is this our last question? Yes.
No question.
Hi, and thank you so much for sharing your genuine stories with us. My question is probably a bit linked with the imposter syndrome, and I apologize if you have to repeat some of the things, but probably I would like to maybe pin down some of the maybe practical solutions you might have in the situation, because throughout my career and life, I think I have been carrying some burdens and pressures that are maybe coming from whether these are cultural perspective, whether how people are perceiving me, my gender, my role, my identity, whatever is that. But these pressures are always linked to always trying to be perfect in everything, master everything, excelling something. So these pressures and this perfection direction never allowed me to take risks in my life sometimes, which probably might have led to doing something that exciting that you are doing. So do you have any like tips or ideas? Jenna, you mentioned that you also had those pressures in your life, right, at some point. I do understand that maybe I need a therapy, but that's another, commitment that I need to take, and I also want to be probably perfect in that as well. So yeah, if you, have any tips.
I think that's an important question. I should probably think about it more. I mean, for example, I never publicly discuss the issue of being a woman in science. I don't like to publicly discuss it. It's not a comfortable conversation. I do not have expertise as a sociologist. I simply have my anecdote, but those pressures to feel that you are representing womankind it's horrible pressure. If I screw up, it represents all women trying to do this. In my graduating class, there were 2 women, and so advice. I mean, it's maybe terrible advice, and we talked about this too earlier, David. It's terrible advice to follow our paths, because our paths were so insane. But my advice would be ignore it. Like, ignore it. Just block it out. It sounds bad in terms of Western ideas of processing information and therapy, where you should be reliving your trauma and talking of mining the depths over and over again. Block it out, man. Like, I am much more with the Buddhists on this. Let the thought come and watch it go away. And it's not a problem I'm going to solve, and it's not one that you're going to solve. But by living by example, I think we're doing a lot more for people. When I look at Jane Goodall, she did wonderful things, not by giving me practical advice, but by being who she is. And do you have a feeling of this?
I'm sort of the same way, man. Just push it down. Just push down the pain and keep going, because everything hurts a little bit. And if you're too precious, you can't get anything done. The other thing is, I think that I'm not a perfectionist, and that's really helped me. I just want to get it out. And I always feel like I'll do another one, even though I never do. But I'm just like, it's okay. Like it's good enough. Like I can't afford to do more than this is what I'm doing. And let it fly, you know? And so, of course, you can't like cheat building codes or things like that when you're building something. But at the same time, you can take a lot of liberties if you have your own agency to do the work. Anyway, I don't know. We can do maybe one more question and then we'll break.
Okay.
Did you have one?
Yes.
I thought you didn't have a question? Okay, I thought you did.
Hi, thanks so much for talking about your experiences. I was wondering if throughout your career there have been like micro decisions or micro moments that seemed inconsequential at the time, but upon reflection really shaped the path that you are on now. And I suppose if you were talking to your younger self in these moments or moments of indecision, what you might say to yourself.
I think almost every single project I've ever done, if I had known what I was getting involved with, I wouldn't have done it. Like every single one. Like New Lab was such an incredible disaster so many times when I was trying to I thought I would I quit all the time. I just didn't tell anybody. Like I would just be like, I'd tell my wife like, fuck this, I'm not doing this anymore. This is terrible. What am I doing? Like, what am I trying to prove? And then it would be Monday and I would just go to a meeting. And I'd be like, I guess I'm still doing it.
Nobody
I
knew
guess
you quit.
I guess here I am. And Pioneer Works is sort of the same way. It's so hard. I mean, it's so hard. But so I don't know. I guess in retrospect, if I didn't have the delusions of grandeur that something wonderful could happen, and I didn't have the suspension of disbelief about that, a lot of things wouldn't have happened. So I don't know if there are micro moments where I would have changed or done something else. I just know that none of it was easy and none of it was that smooth, but I'm kind of grateful for all the journey because now I get to be here with you guys.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
Yeah, I would say I made a sequence of truly terrible career decisions. And everybody was always telling me, why are you doing that? Don't do that. My entire trajectory. At no point did anyone say, that's really solid strategy. So, the whole field would be working on a major upcoming satellite. It was smart to be working on that. Anyway, and I was turning left and working on black holes, which nobody cared about at the time. And now black holes are back. 3 Nobel Prizes this century for work on black holes. So I was always doing the wrong thing, I promise you. So I can say, in terms of advice to my younger self, I really wish I didn't ruminate so much. I really wish I didn't take everything so hard. Even in this project at Pioneer Works, there are days I'm so frustrated, the weight of it feels so intense, and I can lose a night's sleep, and then I show up at an event, I'm like, this is awesome. What was I doing last night? This is great. So what if the social media post was misspelled? You know what I mean? I just wish I hadn't gripped so hard, I guess. And I learned how to enjoy every minute of it, really.
I think that's it. Thank you guys.
Our
Appreciate
clock
it.
says 0. Boom.